Hello and welcome to Your Property Podcast. My name is Michelle Cairns, and with us today we have got Dave Hartnett. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, everyone. How are we all doing?
Great. It's great to have you on. So, Dave, you're from Mountbatten Estates, and you have worked with us on our YPN Total Development Training Program. I've been really, it's been really interesting to get an insight into what you do in terms of land acquisition as one of your main strategies, and the development world, but particularly when working with owners who perhaps they've got some land and they're not sure what to do with it, or there might be some opportunity to work together. So a really interesting topic. We haven't really covered anything like this for a while on the podcast, so I thought we'd invite you on just to share for people. We've obviously one of the hot strategies is service accommodation, and amongst other things, rent to SA, but development is a different ball game. Would you agree?
It certainly is. I live and breathe this industry, if I'm very honest with you. And yes, it is a completely different beast, as it were. But what you'll often find is with bigger deals, there's bigger money. With bigger money, you're implying better professionals. So it's a bit of a weird one. That the bigger the deal, the less risky it is because more people contribute to it, if that makes any sense. That's what we do. We with developers, first and foremost, we do developments, but yeah, we're really skillful in finding off-market developments, building relationships with vendors, landowners, and we've got a lot of planning knowledge. And I like to bring that to the table because I think in this day and age, it's quite risky just to have one exit, which is to build out. That's why I'm not a massive fan of just buying consented schemes if you're lucky enough to get them to stack in the first place. I think people should have an understanding of the planning system so they can add value through PD or permitted development or, full planning. And then that gives you multiple options. You can trade on to the developers. You can sell on to people who have an interest in buying from you, or, you can build out. You have multiple options, which means that, it's less risky for you.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I think it's something that people do miss, whether they're just looking at building from the ground up as a new build, or any sort of planning gain, or doing a development project in itself. So, but for people who are new to, let's say they've not done a development, yet, or they're curious about it, how do you see? Did you jump straight into the kind of development world, or did you go through a journey of buy-to-lets and then commercial and then build up to where you are today?
That's a good question, Michelle. So I did cut my teeth when it came to buy-to-lets and HMOs quite a few years back. I didn't really push it that hard because I was employed. I was involved in finance, and then involved with a state agency. So I really kind of had a full-time job, really. But it was something I did quietly on the background, never took it too seriously, but earned a little bit of money from it and saw some capital appreciation through the many years that I held the properties. I actually sold all that to go into buying in estate agents, and that's really where I kind of took property seriously, I guess. And I owned an estate agency. It was in London. I bought it. It was going for 23 years before I bought it. So it had a huge lettings book, but unfortunately, the lady never concentrated on sales. So I thought, okay, well, there's an angle there I could see straight away. We can build up the sales, and that'll be an income generator. That's not factored into the business. And with businesses of this kind of character, it's predominantly valued on its lettings book, because that's the real value, because sales can fall out of bed. But having a recurring income coming in every single month before you open the doors is quite significant, quite important. So it's valued off a lettings book, and it had a lot of properties under management over, you can imagine, over 23 years, how many she built up. And then there was no other agent in the area doing land and new homes or commercial properties, and I saw that as a potential value add as well. So I set up a land new homes and commercial element, and that kind of took off. It was really popular, and it was really that land and new homes that really gave me a real insight and a real taste for doing developments. And it was quite weird. I was finding these plots of land, sourcing them on to developers, charging a fee. They would get their planning, and I would start selling the units off plan through my estate agents. And then half the people who bought the units off plan were investors, so that kind of fit my lettings arm as well. But I just couldn't get over how I'd kind of maybe sourced on a piece of land for £1 million, and then he got some planning, and then he was either selling it on to someone else, or he was building out and he was turning a £1 million site into 4 or 5 million. I just couldn't wrap my head around it, the numbers that were involved. So I thought, okay, maybe that's something I need to explore. And I think whatever industry you're in, you need to have a real handle on the regulations and what are the potential issues and obstacles and changes to that industry that might come out over the next few years. And I knew Brexit was in the horizon. The tenant fee ban was talked about, and Section 24, which forced a lot of landlords into registering all their buy-to-lets within a company structure. I knew, that could have a negative effect. So I sold out the agency and actually went into development, and that's really why I went into it and how I went into it. I'm coming to your question, I guess, about first time of people going into this industry for the first time. It is kind of high risk, but obviously high rewards. And I would encourage anyone to seriously look at it because it's completely changed my life. But it needs to be done with a bit of foresight. So you need to know what you're doing. And I would definitely encourage people to get a good, proper understanding of the planning system. That's what gave me a competitive edge over everyone else. Why? Because I was working very, very, very closely with a planning consultant, and I learned absolutely everything I could learn about permitted development, the use class order, all the new changes coming out with PD, what I could and couldn't do with certain buildings, what are all the kind of constraints such as flood zone, Article 4, conservation areas, green belt, that would stop that development being taken forward. And even delving a little bit further and looking at a local plan. What's a local plan? It's a council. It's basically a document that the council has to produce that tells you what they want and don't want, and where they want the development, where they don't want it. So it's really being armed with all that information, and that's what really allowed me to deep dive into an area, find those good opportunities, know that the opportunities I was finding the council would like. And even every development comes with potential issues. So it's about being a good problem solver as well. And I knew that those problems could be resolved because I had that planning edge. And that's basically, that's how I started. That's what kind of got me to where I am today, really. Hopefully that kind of makes sense a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's interesting just to see, people's journeys of how they've got into development, because it's not always on that kind of pathway. It's usually much later on for anyone who does start off with the more cash flow strategies of rent to rent or SA or whatever. So just to understand a bit more about what is you do, how much is, like, percentage wise of your projects are actually building out a project, so like new build or converting a project versus just planning gain and then selling it on?
That's a really good question. If you'd asked me that question a year ago, I would say 100% of everything I look at, I build out. It has changed in the last year, and I'll tell you why. Market's changed a little bit. We're doing much larger deals now, which means I need to raise a lot more money than what I've previously had to do and fund myself, which means I'm working with investors now. And as a consequence of that, I need to be mindful of any changes to the market. So with that in mind, I think for every 3 developments we do now, I think we build 2 and we flip 1, or we build 2 and we get planning and we flip 1. So it's changed to a bit of a hybrid now, that we build some, but I'm actually hoping to even flip that to flipping 2 and building 1, if I'm very honest with you, because I've just seen how quicker and easier the whole process of just getting planning and selling a site on compared to finding a site, getting the planning, which takes a year or so, then spending another 2 or 3 years building it out, and then you're getting paid every 4 or 5 years. Granted, it's obviously a larger payday, but the problem with developing out everything is you're at the whim of the market. So if interest rates go up, or if the market changes, or if you have to reduce your GDV, or if build cost goes up, all these come off your profit. It's not coming off anywhere else. So I think people need to be mindful of not building everything out, but certainly flipping a few sites. You don't even have to go through the planning process. There's sites that we find that we flip on, we don't actually add any value to. It's bought really well, it's bought below market value. We know we can flip it for X amount of money. It hasn't cost us anything. But it's good for cash flow. And I think if you're going to be a developer, you certainly one of the biggest things I would stress to everyone is they need to be mindful of cash flow. It's quite an expensive game. There's lots of solicitors and QSs and project managers and surveys to be factored in, and letters to be sent, people to be to meet, and offers to be made. It's going to take a little while to actually get up and get systemized and get running and get the wheels in traction. So it's going to take a certain amount of money to get to that stage. So certainly having, I always recommend to everyone, have a bit of a cash flow system coming in the background. Don't just give up everything to be a developer, because if it takes you like a year or two to find a development and do a deal, that's a very, very long time when you've got no money coming in. So if you, like you mentioned earlier, some people maybe evolved to doing this from maybe a rent to rent or rent to SA or buy to let HMOs, maybe they cut their teeth on that. So I would strongly suggest that you have a portion of that still in your life, have something good coming in while you get the development business up and running.
Yeah, or I suppose people could just work with investors or work with joint venture partners who perhaps don't have the time or the inclination to learn all of these skills. So you could work with somebody else, or I suppose just work with someone like yourself. So if people find a site, and I come across it all the time, where people see an opportunity, or perhaps they are direct to vendor on something, and then they don't know what to do with it. It's too big. So do you find people come to you with these deals and say, okay, help, what do I do now?
I reckon about half my week every week is basically troubleshooting like this. It's okay. I mentor quite a few people, and as you know, I've got this system where we've trained VAs to find sites, not just for me, but also to find sites for other developers. Those developers, they tend to find a lot of sites, and like you quite rightly mentioned, some of those sites are slightly bigger than what they feel comfortable with. Maybe it's either a different area, different size, a little bit too big, maybe a little bit too expensive. Maybe they don't know the planning. Maybe they don't have the right team to be able to put together. Maybe they don't have the right funding to be able to package a deal like this up and get it up and running. So certainly that's where I can add a lot of value to and bring a lot of value to the table.
What does that look like? So I'm thinking, personally, I've got somewhere in mind that, I had a contact and it was a big hotel, and it's just still sat there, and I drive past it every now and then and think, God, I need to get in touch with the owner and see if there's anything there. But really, I just don't have time for something like that. It's not my skill set. It's I'm sure I could pull the team together if I wanted to, but a big 12-month, 18-month project like that just isn't where I'm at right now. So how would that look if people brought a deal like that to you? What could they expect in terms of working with yourself and your team?
Okay, so this is quite typical of a lot of developers where people bring them sites sporadically. So every deal is different. There's going to be a lot of moving parts with that deal. I guess first you need to explore what can and can't be done with it, and then we need to go through that, ascertain if the planning can be done, and if it can, then we're at a stage of identifying, all right, how many apartments or co-living units or commercial can we get out of that building, and then it's going to be a case of working with the architects and to design something that might be fit for purpose for that site. And then once we have a sensible approach for that site, then we need to analyze it and speak to the agents and get a good appraisal for the site and work backwards to try and get that site accepted. Now, you are going to be working with a investor or a large investor, or maybe a few different investors. They'll need a return. Then obviously the developer that you're partnering with will need a return as well, because obviously he's got to take that through from initial idea or concept right through to either getting the planning and developing out as well. So there's going to be a good minimum a year working on the planning, maybe even another 2 years or so to go through that whole build phase. So that developer is going to be working on a project for 3 years. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, a lot of different professionals adding a lot of value along the way, lots of different investors, site visits, then selling all the units, paying back the banks. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So, unfortunately, some people who bring a site to the table think, well, I just want a 50-50. But it's not as simple as that. If you look at the huge amount of work that goes into it, from all the professionals, the developers, the banks, the investors want a return, the banks want a return. All the professionals are quite expensive to work with. Then there's the developer's time.
And the risk.
And the risk, because you bring a site to a developer, no one ever thinks about the risk. So what's the risk? What happens if the market turns? What happens if build cost goes up? What happens if, the banks won't just give you money. The bank will want that developer to do a personal guarantee on the site. So you're going to have to guarantee at least 20% of the equity that's going to be raised. That could be quite a big chunk of funds. So long story short,
is it straightforward, like a sourcing fee, and would the person get that at the end once it's completed, or is there a way of getting like an equity share or anything like that?
So I guess this is a conversation that the person's going to need to have with a developer. I've seen so many different ways of structuring a deal. The simplest way is you get a finder's fee, and that can typically be between maybe 1% and 2% of the purchase price. Then there is you can get a finder's fee together with maybe like a kind of earn and learn or learn and invest type scenario, where you'll still get paid a fee on completion of the legal paperwork, but you're along for the journey. And this can be really valuable for people starting out, because they learn the planning system, they make some great contacts, they come on site tours and site visits, they meet other investors who are involved in the project, which potentially can maybe joint venture with them at a later stage on a different project. They just get to see all the moving parts of the development over the course of, say, 2 or 3 years, which is invaluable. And meet some banks along the way who come out to some of these site tours. So that can be really, really valuable, like I said. So that's another way of doing it. I have even seen it in the past where someone maybe gets a 2% finder's fee, but they only take 1 now, and they invest the other 1% in the development, which means they actually get more than the 1% at the end of 3 years. I've even seen it in the past where on some of the larger deals, the finder's fee was 450,000, and instead of taking it as a lump of cash, the sourcer took it as one apartment from the development. So there's so many different ways, clever ways you could structure deals. It's about having a conversation to see what will work for everyone.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love just seeing what goes on and what are the possibilities, as you say, for someone who's just coming in. They might just think, okay, just get the sourcing fee and that's it. But actually, it might be interesting to do that earn and learn, or another way around it, where you're getting to keep part of the development. So before, you just mentioned about how you spend half of your week just kind of going through troubleshooting all of these. Are there any deals that stand out for you in terms of you look at it and think that's a no-brainer, let's go straight into that? And if so, what are they?
Something that's a no-brainer to me would be something that is vacant on or in and around a high street location in a commuter belt town or in London. And it's of a decent size. So what I mean there is it's probably in excess of, say, 5,000 square feet. The reason being, I know something like that would be really attractive for a number of reasons. One, it's vacant. Why is that important? Well, all the new PD now, PD rules, it has to be vacant before you can submit your PD application. That's one of the new changes that
Right.
came out a couple of years ago. Before, you could just have a tenant in there, put in your planning application, get your PD, and then kick the tenants out, and then do your development. That's all changed now because they didn't like the government didn't like the idea of you forcing tenants out. So vacant. Why in and around kind of high street location? Well, transport links, accessibility, loads of local amenity on the doorsteps of shops, bars, restaurants. It's going to be, you're going to be converting a building, so it's going to be flats, and who move into the flats, it tends to be kind of younger people, and younger people want to have everything on your doorstep. Why near transport? Well, the majority, a lot of people, especially in commuter towns, they commute into London every day. So having, something that's maybe less than an hour is quite advantageous, I would say. And why 5,000 square feet? If you look at something too small, say for argument's sake, it's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 square feet. If you've got the money to do it yourself, great, you'll be able to get 3 or 4 apartments out of it. If you don't, and you're starting out, then you're going to have to bring an investor on board. And bringing an investor on board and going through a JV agreement and an option contract and development agreement and setting up a company or an SPV, going through all that, and then paying for the planning, and then converting the building into, say, 2 to 4 apartments. If you sell it all, I mean, say for argument's sake, each apartment's 500 grand. You're into it for 2 million, and you work backwards 20% profit on GDV. You're looking at about maybe 400 grand profit after 2 years of worth of work. If you break that down, it's 100 grand a year. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but it's not
For the risk.
It's not when you look at the risk, and
Yeah.
also 200 grand to an investor who's dumping up a lot of money and guarantee, he's going to have to be on the hook for a PG as well, and he's covering the planning, and then there's a risk involved as well. So 200 grand to invest these days isn't a huge amount of money. So that's why I would encourage you to probably look for something maybe 3, 4, 5,000 square feet. Because that'll really start to get an investor excited at those kind of numbers, and you're probably into it by maybe 8 or 10 apartments. But that kind of comes back to the question: what happens if I've never done 8 to 10 before? Well, you need to probably partner with maybe someone like myself, or maybe another developer who's got that track record experience, who can bring that to the table, and then the banks will feel happy and secure that the money they're lending is going to be lent to someone who can actually, do the development.
Yeah. And a question that I see a lot is when people looking at development is how to work out the GDV, so the end value.
Yep.
So the gross development value for people who are not sure about that. What do you think? Where do people start with that if they're not sure, or do they just bring the deal to you and say, "This looks good"? What do you think?
I think you do need to have a bit of an understanding on the numbers, because 90% of stuff that you look at won't work. A, because it won't work from a planning perspective, but B, maybe there's just something about the development that is just a little bit off-putting. But then if you get through those 2 scenarios, you can get to the next stage, it's going to be down to numbers. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to fail because it's been priced too high by a vendor, or more importantly, probably an agent who's been involved. That's why I try and not go through agents. I just go do my own direct to vendor stuff, and that's how we've built our whole portfolio off the back of that. But the GDV is a good question. I'm still a little bit old school, so I like going to Rightmove and Zoopla and trying to compare like for like. If I'm going to be building a block of flats and they're 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms in a nice area close to a station, try and find something similar, and that's a good metric, because you can get to see what it was advertised for, is it sold, is it not? So I do 2 or 3 sense checks. One is I do my own research and find out what I think it's selling for in the area. Then I speak to local agents, but I don't just speak to any local agent. I normally try and find a land and new homes agent in the area, because they're far more experienced for analyzing deals and telling you much more accurate prices compared to, say, a normal sales and lettings agent. they really understand the whole new build concept, and they'll actually break it down by floor. They'll actually break it down and tell you what floors are more expensive and which are cheaper. They'll break it down as a pound per square foot as well. So it'll be a far more accurate appraisal than what you'll get from anyone else. And then I probably go on to like a prop software like Searchland or Nimbus, and they have pound per square foot layers on there, and that gives you about an average across a whole area. And I think between the three, you'll have a good sense of where that GDV needs to be.
Right. Okay. And so, okay, so people like just do they can do a high level, right? Just to kind of work out whether this is worth bringing to the table or not, as you said there. And do you prefer to find an empty site, like an infill site that's got, perhaps no planning or some planning on, and then just build out? Or would you prefer to find a project that you can do something with, let's say, convert a hotel or a pub or something existing?
I would always encourage everyone to look at something that's a brownfield site, so something that's previously developed, something that has a structure there already, such maybe like a mixed use scheme or a commercial building or maybe an office or whatever it is, and explore PD first, because it's straightforward, it's quicker, it's cheaper, and there's less surveys that need to be attached to a planning application. I will never knock infills, which you mentioned. I think they're fantastic. I think corner plots, infills, garden, land assembly, all fantastic. But I've certainly learned over the years now that even though they're great opportunities, they're long and tiresome.
Yeah.
It takes at least 2-3 times longer to get through planning than a PD application. It's far more expensive because they can keep coming back to you and asking you for more surveys. I tend to front load my planning applications, which means instead of people coming back to me asking me for more information or asking me to withdraw it or refuse it and come back at a later stage, I kind of go a little bit overkill and actually give them way more information that they need. So then there's no reason to refuse. But as a consequence of that, I'm probably spending 20, 30, 40, 50,000 more on planning applications. So what I'm trying to say to you is, with everyone listening to this, I would definitely encourage everyone to look at commercial buildings. PD, straightforward, it's quicker, it's easier, it's cheaper. There's a lot more of those opportunities available in the market now than there ever has been because of COVID. And I still believe that there's still a decent short window, probably of about another 2 to 3 years before a lot of developers find out about what's out there on the PD. B, a lot of vendors find out what they can do with their buildings, because you'll often find there's a short window of maybe 2 or 3 years. Then everyone finds out about it. Then the owners find out about it. The owners get PD, and then they want to get the PD and sell it before, with the planning attached. So this kind of strip more meat off the bone. And then obviously all the training companies find out about it. So I would say, yeah, I would encourage everyone to be looking at PD right now, because I think it's probably in the history of doing what we're doing, there's never been a better time to look for these opportunities.
And for people who aren't familiar with this PD and the window opportunity, do you want to just briefly mention the changes that happened in August, was it 2021?
Yeah.
And why now? So you've got a list of these opportunities under the PD changes, light industrial and commercial changes, etc. So just kind of mention what that window is, and also out of that window is commercial. I know you mentioned it just there. Would commercial be your favorite out of all those changes in the opportunities?
It would be, but for some reason, every development I'm doing right now are all new built from the ground up. I haven't actually gone out of my way to do that, but it just happens to be that out of all the sites we found, all the letters we sent, and it was a mix of everything. It just happens that the opportunities that did come forward and get agreed happen to be from new build from the ground up. But I'm really still keen to do the commercial to resi. So what does that look like? All right, so the government were worried that when COVID happened, not a lot of people would reopen their shops, and even out of the ones who would reopen, they were worried that people wouldn't come back into the office environment because they were still, COVID wouldn't just go away overnight. So they had a worry on their hands. They were worried that basically the country would turn into a whole load of ghost towns, buildings shut down, no one in them. So what they did very cleverly was they said that we know that the planning system's a bit convoluted and takes time. So instead of having a commercial building and, you need to get planning to go from, say, one use class to another, and that takes time and money, we're just going to create one super class E. And they amalgamated and put together all the old use classes all into one use class, Class E, which is fantastic. Why? Because now if you own a commercial building and it's on a high street or location, for argument's sake, you can change it from a doctor's to a dentist to an office to retail, a retail to a bank to an estate agents, all literally overnight without planning. Why? Because they're all the same use class. That's fantastic. That means if you want to keep renting out your commercial building, you now have a whole host of different tenants that now you weren't able to track before. But what they cleverly did as well is they brought out something called Class MA, which meant that if anything that's within Class E, you can now use Class MA to convert it to residential all under PD. Now that was game changing. Why? Because there was a lot of buildings that were historically quite difficult to convert. Doctors, dentists, nurseries and creches, everything within kind of D1 and D2 use class. Remember now D1 and D2 doesn't exist anymore, it's Class E. So that's kind of created a really interesting opportunity. But also what happened was B1C light industrial, it did have PD previously and it timed out. Like sometimes when the government bring out a PD, right, it'll have a time code attached to it and it'll time out at a certain day in the future. And the reason they do it is they would just want to test it for a short period of time to see if it works. And if it works really well, like Office to Resi did, they'll just take off the time code, they'll just let it run indefinitely. Sometimes like light industrial, they weren't too sure about it. So they put a time code on it, timed out, and they just didn't bring it back. But when Class E was brought out, that was one of the more interesting scenarios of the whole situation, that they brought light industrial back into the mix as well. They put that back into Class E, which now means it's got PD again. A lot of people don't know that. So what are the things to be focusing on? So let's look at Class E. What is it? So it's A1 and A2. So that's retail, banks, financial, estate agents, all the typical stuff that you find on a high street. You got B1A office, B1C light industrial, D1, D2, that's all kind of medical and educational stuff. That all falls within Class E now. These are the type of buildings you need to be focusing on. But also what's more important as well, people don't realize this, another PD that came out at the same time was Class AA and Class AB, which allow you to do up to two additional stories above commercial units, whether it's in a detached form or a terrace form. That's quite interesting because now you could look at the same building, and whereas before you could only look at it as a conversion opportunity, now you should be looking at it as a conversion, but also a new build in the airspace opportunity. So you should be, if you're looking at sites, with the potential of adding value twice, one as a conversion and one as an airspace opportunity, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get those deals a stack.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's just
like a double value add.
100%, exactly. The only thing I would kind of steer people and to be a little bit cautious of, not every single building can hold the additional weight-bearing load of an additional 2 stories, because it was never built for a 2-story building, 2 additional stories on top. So what I would encourage everyone to do is when you're doing it, work it out, see if you can get it to stack. If it does stack, then the first point of call should really be to have a conversation with a structural engineer, just to make sure that if you were going to build it out, that building can take the additional weight that you're suggesting. But bear in mind, you can get planning without a structural survey. It's not part of the planning process. So there's actually a lot of people getting planning and just selling sites on.
Wow, so much we've covered. I think we could just carry on talking all day, but it's been really, really useful, interesting, so many different tips and advice there. So thank you. Just to kind of wrap up then, so you mentioned before about you do some mentoring, coaching for some of your mentees. And what do you notice about people who are coming to you and working with you? What is the difference between the people who make a success out of it and the ones that don't?
I guess you need to be 100% committed. There's an old saying about if you need to take the island, you need to burn the boats. And I think that's my approach with anything. If you're going to be successful in life, you just have to commit 110% and know that it won't happen overnight, but you certainly, with the right people, surround yourself with the right people, the right knowledge, the right training, the right mentorships, the right courses, everything. I'm a massive advocate of personal development and ongoing training, because without that, I wouldn't be where I am right now. So you need to be 100% focused, 100% committed. I know it's going to take a little bit of time, hence why I said have some sort of income coming in the meantime, so it takes that pressure off. The people who don't make it are the ones that don't have an income coming in, that need to be successful within 6 months. And then when they're not successful within 6 months, they quit because they've got to go back to a day job. So just have that income coming in. That'll take an awful lot of pressure off you, which will free up your mind into just, do what you need to do. But yeah, they're the kind of things I would suggest. Be just really cautious and careful with who you choose as a mentor as well. There's a lot of questionable mentors out there which have never done a development, or they're good salespeople, but I wouldn't go to them for help or advice or to help with my career. Also, I would say, starting out as well, you need to be working with investors. So maybe even have that as a USP that you track and monitor every week and every month. How many people have you spoken to? How many meetings you had? How many coffees you had? How many people have kind of said yes, they would be potentially willing to work with you if you found the right deal? And then when it comes to the right deals, just you do need, forget about relying on other people to give you deals. That doesn't happen. You need to take ownership of that, and you need to be good at site finding, and you need to be good at planning. Why? Because if you're good at finding sites, you have probably the most amount of authority within that JV structure. Why? Because you can take that deal anywhere. You can take it anywhere. So get good at that. You'll be paid handsomely for it, and you'll be able to structure good deals with people where you might be able to stay in the deal and not just earn and learn, but also get a nice profit share on the back end. But yeah, you need to be 100% committed and focused, because if you're not, and if money is your driving factor, your motivating factor with this, I promise you'll drop out, because it's not enough to get you up on a cold morning in the winter. It's like going to a gym, isn't it? The ones who love the gym won't find it an issue, but the ones who, have a question over their motivation going, they're the ones that falter a little bit in the winter. So I would say probably have the same approach when it comes to doing developments.
Fantastic. Wow, that sounds like a good place to wrap up. Where can people find out more about what you're up to now, and on social media? Have you got a preferred channel?
You're more than welcome to catch us on our website, which is mountbattenestates.co.uk. I'm on, I think, nearly every social media. So Facebook I'm on, and Instagram, LinkedIn, to say a few. And we run courses, whether it's online or weekends. I do webinars, so you might be able to catch me on there as well. But reach out to us on any media or through the website, and we can tell you what we're doing. Also, one thing as well I'm going to finish on, I'm a massive advocate of networking. I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't meet the team that I have and the investors I'm working with and what have you. So a large part of that was me getting out of my comfort zone, getting out from behind a laptop, going into property networking events and social gatherings to meet the people, That's where you need to, that's where you're going to grow. That's where you're going to meet your team. That's where you're going to meet your investors. So we do run golf and clay shooting and car track days, and we bring lots of good quality people together. So if you're looking for team or investors or people at JV, what I've got some really good events and a lot of good people and a really good network I'd like to introduce to everyone. So yeah, reach out to me if you've got an interest in growing your network as well.
Fantastic. It sounds like a good excuse to do some networking.
Brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much for your time, Dave. It's been really, really useful and insightful. So thank you very much.
Lovely. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everyone.